Good afternoon on a chilly day with an overcast sky. There's no wind though. The air temperature at the moment is 5 degrees, and as I said I would in a previous video, I'm going to do a comparative test between the three FireMaple Petrel pots, the original one, which has a 600ml capacity, the second one they brought out last year, which has 750ml capacity, and this year's Ramen Pot, which has an 800ml capacity, and see how they compare used with the MSR Bucket Rocket Deluxe stove, because this is the stove I've got that fits all of them reasonably well. And I'm also going to do a test with the Jetboil Stash Pot, which has the heat exchanger on the bottom but doesn't have the the slots on the bottom for fitting in the arms of a stove, and see if that makes any significant difference. Now, this is the lightest of the four pots, and arguably it's currently the best heat exchanger pot for solo backpacking available. But there's one disadvantage: you can't buy it on its own. You can only get it with the Jetboil Stash stove, which is an okay stove for 3-season use. It's not regulated, so in cold weather the performance will fall off. The colder it is, the more it will fall off, and when the canister is partly empty, it will also fall off. Whereas a regulated stove like this works a lot better in the cold, and as I've found, you can use a canister till it's almost empty before there's any significant difference in the heat output. But as I say, you can't get that pot on its own. These three are all standalone pots. You can buy each one separately, and the stash unit with the stove is expensive. None of these pots are expensive. I will put weights and prices up on the screen so you can do a comparison like that. But for the moment, these are the four pots. I have gas canisters, which I've weighed, because I will also check what the fuel use is. And in fact, although it'll be boil times that I measure, it's how much gas is used to boil the water that is, I think, most significant. I've never felt that a minute or two's difference in boiling water really matters. And with a stove like this, pots like this, you're talking about boiling 500ml, maybe 600 or 700ml. You're not talking about boiling 3 or 4 litres, when the boil time between different stoves and pots might be a fairly big difference. You're talking about small amounts for a couple of mugs of coffee or tea or some packet soup or whatever. So I don't think the boil times really matter, but the fuel usage, if you're on a long trip, can make a difference as to how many canisters you need to carry. I say a long trip because I reckon, I've used one of these canisters with a non-regulated stove, the Pocket Rocket 2, and it lasted me for 2 weeks. So I'd have needed to be out for longer than 2 weeks to need to carry another canister. If you're out for a week or less, one of these canisters should easily be fine with whatever gas stove you're using. The smaller 100-gram canisters I find with a regulated stove lasts me 4 to 5 days. Of course, this all depends on how much water you boil, how often. At an overnight camp, I'm generally using 1.5 to 2 litres of water that I heat up. So I need enough gas for that. For the test, I'm going to use 500 ml of water in each pot. I'm going to keep the lids on because that's what I do. You know, in the field, I always have the lid on to speed boil times and conserve gas. I think if you did a test without the lids on, this one would probably be the most efficient because being tall and narrow, there's less surface area of water to lose heat. Whereas this one, which is the widest pot, you've got a big surface area of water to lose heat. But hopefully these differences will be ironed out by having the lids on. So anyway, we should get on with the first test. The water temperature, by the way, which I've also measured, is 8 degrees. So we got 5 degrees Celsius air temperature and 8 degrees Celsius water temperature. So it's not very warm, and it's certainly not the conditions which the brands generally use when they're producing test figures for, you know, boil times and so on. But it's also not as realistic, you know, as actually out camping. And as I say, the results are comparative. They're not necessarily what you would get in the field, which would depend as well. What is the air temperature? Is there a breeze? What is the water temperature? However, what it should do is show the differences, if any, between the different pots, and, you know, if there is a difference, is it significant? But we will start off with the original Petrel pot. Let's put in, 500 ml. That's it. Let's see. It will fit all of them, but only just. That's on firmly now, so we can turn the gas on, start the top watch, turn the gas up full. I'm going to do the test with the gas full because then it's the same heat output for each of the pots. In the field, I normally don't turn the gas up full because I'm not in that much of a hurry, and it's more fuel efficient to have a stove turned up half, 3/4 and no more. But for this test, it's full power, and we will see just how long it takes. Oh, the steam coming out already. That's after 51 seconds. Can start to hear a bit more noise in the pot now. Yep, we have boiling 131. So let's write that down. $131. I'll put that aside. The stove cools down very quickly when it's this temperature. I'm not going to touch the arms, which are probably still hot, but I can take it out of the canister here and we'll see how much gas that used. Well, that 6 grams of gas to bring 500 ml of water to boil at this temperature. That is actually both faster and less fuel than I expected. Well, let's start off with the next canister and the next pot. Make sure I've got everything properly noted down. And the next one is this one. Now, again, $500 ml. Of the 3 pots, this is the one that fits most easily onto the Pocket Rocket Deluxe. In theory, the bases should all be the same with the slots, but in fact they're not. There's very slight variations which can make a difference depending on what stove you're using. Anyway, let's see how this one does. And we have boiling. $132. Well, that makes it $132 or $131. I don't think my test is accurate enough to measure, fractions of a second. So effectively, they're the same. And take the lid off. You can see lots of steam coming out. I'll put that one over there. And weigh the canister again. Try not to catch the arm of my down jacket on the legs of the stove, arms of the stove, which are probably still hot. 5 grams of gas. The third of the petrol pots, and the one that so far, and I don't think there'll be a change, is my favourite, but that's got nothing to do with how it affects boil time or fuel efficiency. It's purely to do with the shape. I prefer wider pots in which, you know, I can easily stir food while it's cooking, and which are easier to use as a bowl to eat out of, which I say has nothing to do with how efficient or not the pot is. That said, this is the heaviest of the pots, and also of course has the largest capacity. And if all you're doing is boiling water to use, you know, for rehydrating packets of food or making hot drinks, then the original petrol, the 600ml one, is actually fine. But if you're doing any simmering or you want to use it to eat out of, the shape is not the most convenient. Now, this is the most awkward one to fit onto the stove. It does go on eventually. There it is, but it is more awkward than the other two. Anyway, here we go, the third one. I can hear it coming to the boil, but it is taking considerably longer than the other two. Well, here we go. Yeah. We have boiling, but at 2 minutes 25, which surprises me that it should be a whole minute longer than the other two pots. And I suspect that will mean as well that it has used up more gas. Let's find out. Yep. 8 grams of gas. Which, as I say, that's a bit of a surprise. On this basis, the original petrol pot is significantly the most efficient, using 5 grams, and this one using 8 grams. Yeah, that over time that would be a noticeable difference. I will, of course, run the tests again. I won't do a video of it all again. I'll run the tests again. Oh no, I've used that cartridge already. I'll get another one. And see if the results are, as I expect they will be, a little different. But certainly that was, shall we say, not expected. And I'll do a last one with the Jetboil Stash. Which is also given as having 800ml capacity, though it's actually total volume is smaller than this one. And of course this one simply balances on the stove, which means all of these are quite stable. Once they're in place, it can tip over quite a bit and the pot will not fall off. With this one, it starts to slide immediately, so you really do need to make sure that it's level and firm. It's another reason why I prefer the petrol pots with the slots in the bottom. Anyway, let's see just how this one does. And I think we're going to have boiling very soon. Yep, there we are at 2 minutes. And weighing the canister, it has used 5 grams. So although it took a bit longer than the petrol pots, well, the 2 of the petrol pots, it actually used roughly the same amount of gas as the Petrel G2. So I am surprised by these results, but then with anything like this it's always best not to assume you know what's going to happen and then try to influence it to make sure it happens. My guess that this would be the most efficient pot was completely wrong, because on this test it's the least efficient, both in terms of boil times, taking a minute longer than the other 2 petrol pots and 30 seconds longer than the stash pot, but more significantly in fuel usage. 8 grams used as opposed to 5 grams for the stash and the original petrol pot, and 6 grams for the 750ml petrol pot. My thoughts on this are that I'll do the test again, as I said, and see if I get comparable results. I will probably still go on mostly using this one, at least for trips of, less than a week, when overall gas usage, fuel efficiency isn't that significant. But if I'm doing just boiling water, if I've got, cooking the bagged meals, rehydrating the bagged meals, and I'm not doing any simmering or any, eating out of the pot, I'll probably take the original Petrel pot. I mean, as I said, this is the lightest pot. However, I do like the stability you get with the ones that, lock more onto the burner so it can tilt a bit. That said, before I had any of these, I had used this with the burner it comes with a fair bit and not managed to knock it over. Anyway, I hope you found that interesting. I'll say I'll do the test again and see if I get very different results, and I'll be taking the various pots out at different times and actually seeing what, as I've done before, usage in the hills is like. But it's an interesting comparative test, if possibly nothing more. Thank you for watching.